in 2018, nearly 60% of reported threats were responsible by professional criminals. So whether they be organized crime groups or state-affiliated actors. And moreover, nearly 30% of those breaches were actually internal threats. If we look at the graphic to the right, we can see that a great proportion of those compromises occurred within minutes, and certainly an equally or almost as high percentage of them took nearly months to detect. So what this information tells us is there is a huge gap, and companies are not doing a very good job in terms of closing the gap between the amount of time it takes for a hacker to compromise their network and the amount of time that it takes to actually detect it. So therein lies the problem, which SIEM addresses. So what is SIEM and how does it work? So basically, I'm assuming that most folks on the phone here understand that SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Management. And basically what a SIEM does is SIEM ingests and aggregates and performs analytics on security-related information throughout an organization. And this analytics enables quick detection of security events. It also strengthens an organization's situational awareness beyond just detection. So not only is it important to detect threats, but it's also important to understand how an attack occurred, what were the early signs of it, and how could it be prevented in the future. As a result of this information, a SIEM can allow an organization to appropriately respond to a threat. So how does LogPoint do this? So basically, LogPoint, if we look at LogPoint, a SIEM as being those components contained within the yellow box, and the data sources being on the left, basically LogPoint collects data from a wide variety of data sources. These can be servers, network gear, they can be databases, applications, printers, IoT devices, firewalls, basically any device that can produce a log. LogPoint is able to ingest that information. And LogPoint is actually very flexible with respect to that. So it can ingest this information using agents, it can be agentless, it can be using syslog, it can be using collectors and fetchers. So really, LogPoint has built out a very robust infrastructure for taking in data of all types throughout the network. When data is received, the first stage or one component of collection is now classification of that data. So understanding what that log is telling you, what type of log it is, and what are the individual pieces of data from which you can pull that you can pull from that log. Another important component is in the concept of enrichment. So basically taking information from a log source and enriching it with other information related to that. So you know, for example, when information about a particular IP is collected, it would be useful to know what the host name of that IP was or the NetBIOS name was at the time of collection, and so that information can help you to link one log source to another, and once again have really rich data, performing better analytics. The next component is routing, and this is an important component within LogPoint, especially as it relates to treatment of information, treatment of log data. So certainly not all log data is the same, and certainly the contents of log data cannot necessarily be treated the same. So if you can imagine a log message that contains a username or social security number or some other type of personally identifiable information, certainly that information by law needs to be handled in a certain manner. And there are restrictions around who is able to actually see that information. So LogPoint gives you the ability to intelligently route log information to any number of repositories of your choice. And these repositories can each have their own set of access controls, as well as retention limits. So the other important thing to consider is how long do you want to keep these logs? Certainly not all logs are the same. Some firewall logs are very chatty and can be quite useful for troubleshooting issues, but don't have a lot of long-term value. So there's no sense in you know, using up all your expensive storage holding firewall logs. The next phase of LogPoint is the analytics phase. Analytics includes search, correlation, machine learning, and response. Basically, all the analytics within LogPoint are based on searches. So LogPoint has built a very robust and strong search interface, and thereby enabling very rich analytics, correlation of events from multiple data sources, to be linked with information from other sources, and all presented through a very robust and fast search interface. So why is this important? As I mentioned, early detection is important, but for organizations looking to mature their security program, it's equally important to have a complete picture of what is occurring in the network. So rather than just stopping threats or stopping or detecting them quickly and responding to them, it's very important to have the full picture. And the SIEM can help you understand questions like, what happened, who was involved, when did it start, how did it get in, what was accessed, how do we respond. So all this information is very important with respect to providing an organization situational awareness. And situational awareness allows them to respond more quickly to threats, to answer important questions about that, and furthermore, to prevent those types of attacks from occurring in the future. Certainly, being able to stop threats earlier in the kill chain is important before those attacks have a chance to actually compromise data. So LogPoint's powerful analytics capabilities focus attention on those areas which require attention. And this is due in large part due to LogPoint's ability to leverage diverse sets of data for context. So LogPoint can accomplish this because, first and foremost, LogPoint leverages a common taxonomy throughout its data storage. What that means is that logs from a variety of sources can be stored in a common format where common fields have the same name. For example, if you're taking logs from a Palo Alto firewall and in a WebSense proxy, you want to know that if you're referring to a user or to a source address or to a MAC address, for example, all those terms have the same meaning in those different log sources. So what LogPoint does is it essentially normalizes that data into a common taxonomy, and thereby enabling very rich analytical capabilities, the ability to correlate and to link together disparate sources of data very easily without having to perform very complex remapping of data. The other really important thing about LogPoint is its ability to present information using very effective visualization capabilities. So of course, you could present all the data in the world in tabular format, but having a format that's appropriate to the type of data is even more effective in terms of appealing to a human's intuition and ability to see things from a distance. So at the end of the day, what do these advanced analytics provide? It's the ability to reduce time to action, the ability to respond more quickly to threats, the ability to improve your network security, improve your information security, thereby preventing attacks and breaches occurring in the future. So LogPoint's UBA leverages machine learning algorithms to augment what can be detected with Core SIEM alone. So Core SIEM is very good at looking for known goods and known bads. It's not as effective when something could be good or bad depending on the context. And that's actually where machine learning comes in and is very effective at that. So as an example, if someone loads a large amount of data to a site on the internet, is that by itself, is that something that you want to be alerted to? That's something that could be totally benign, or it could be part of a data exfiltration. So certainly understanding what happened before and after that event can help you to understand better the context of that event and help you to determine whether or not that is in fact something that could be malicious and is worthy of further investigation. So once again, LogPoint UBA helps you to bring your attention to those items which are important. So I mentioned situational awareness and maturing your security posture. Certainly LogPoint is able to accomplish this through a couple of a couple of characteristics about the LogPoint solution. First of all, the centralized analysis allows for a single pane of glass for investigation. So this is very important, not only in that it provides a single place to go to for the source of truth, but it allows a greater diversity of data to be considered. So rather than looking at things from a siloed perspective, in terms of this security tool detected this and that one detected that, being able to look at it holistically. Improved detection, and once again, this is a byproduct of the centralized analysis. The fact that we're taking logs from all devices, and we're looking at them holistically and centrally, we can have improved detection and more accuracy. And correlation can ultimately mean lower false positives, lower false negatives. If one device is telling you something and then a second and third device is also telling you the same thing, then you can have more faith, more trust that what it's telling you is actually correct. Faster response limits the impact that an attacker may be able to inflict on an organization by responding to it more quickly. If you can catch something in the early stages of the attack kill chain, when you can find an attacker during the recon stage, then you can stop them before they actually steal data and actually inflict harm to your organization. And certainly machine learning, as I mentioned, machine learning is there to augment traditional SIEM with its rule-based approach, and machine learning with its machine-based learning approach, allowing you to have a better understanding of what the typical behavior is of devices and entities within your organization, and when that behavior changes, whether or not that there might be an indication of something going on. So at this point, I'm going to switch into the demo. If you give me 1 second, I will switch over. And actually, so I'm just going to take a pause. I'm assuming that everyone can hear me, and if you aren't able to hear me, please send a chat. But it looks like I'm checking the chat, and looks like we're good to go. So at this point, I'm going to switch over to start talking about the LogPoint demo. So right now, actually, I'm going to refresh it so it doesn't tell me that I'm not logged in. And the LogPoint demo, the LogPoint user interface is web-based. It leverages HTML5 for a modern, interactive look and feel. And it's actually the same interface for both administration as well as data analytics through the system. So it's the same interface whether you're an administrator configuring LogPoint or you're a security analyst using LogPoint. LogPoint leverages role-based access. So what you see in the LogPoint dashboard in the LogPoint user interface will be dependent on what your role is and what your permission levels are. And right now we're actually looking at LogPoint dashboard features or LogPoint's dashboards. So LogPoint features very powerful dashboarding capabilities. Essentially what a dashboard is, dashboards are comprised of widgets, which are these squares here. And essentially each widget is a LogPoint search query and a particular format for presenting that data. So if you see, we can easily look into the details of this widget. We can see the search that sits behind it, as well as the type of data that's being presented, the manner in which the data is being presented. So in this case, we're looking at a world map. We could change that if necessary. So these widgets are entirely customizable. As I shown, you can actually you can change the query behind it. You can actually move these around. You can change the position, change the size of them. And essentially, dashboards offer the LogPoint user a high-level view into key security metrics and indications of compromise. So dashboards are typically customized to a particular user's role and responsibilities, but they can be also shared among users as well. So for example, we're looking at the SOC dashboard, and this is a dashboard that might be typical of the kind of dashboard you would expect to see within a SOC. So we've got some high-level information, and of course, SOC analysts would be interested in things like, potentially where in the world traffic is coming from for their Office 365, where in the world traffic is coming from on their VPN, some failed logins, some authorization failures. This is all information that is, relatively high level, but it serves as a good key metric in terms of the overall security of your organization. If we switch to a different dashboard tab, we're looking at one that is a user account management dashboard. So this dashboard contains information which is more likely to be interesting to someone like a domain admin. So at the top here, we're seeing account activities over time. Basically accounts being deleted, reset, disabled. We're seeing here a heat map related again to account activity. This sand key diagram shows us shows us basically who is creating different accounts, who is deleting them, and what the usernames are. And so once again, I think this dashboard does a good job in kind of displaying or demonstrating the richness of visualization techniques that are available within LogPoint. So certainly, having the data at your fingertips is one thing. Being able to display it in a clear and intuitive way is very important as well. So LogPoint ships with thousands of out-of-the-box pre-configured dashboard widgets for over 500 products. So you may be looking at this and wondering, what is the level of effort that goes into making this dashboard? Well, the reality is it's actually fairly low, because LogPoint has pre-built all of these custom dashboards, and the dashboards are basically centered around either certain vendors' products and certain security frameworks and compliance regulations. So if you have a Palo Alto firewall, for example, we've got a number of dashboards that you can load up and immediately start using. And typically the way it works is users will generally see what's available from LogPoint and then use that to build their own custom dashboard. This is obviously a demo system, so we've got a number of different demo dashboard tabs, but in the real world, a particular user would have probably maybe 3 or 4 dashboard tabs centered around information that's relevant to their job. If we click over here at the Nessus tab, we can see some of the dashboard widgets that are related to Nessus. So Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. So of course, this information would be relevant to the teams that are responsible for patching and for vulnerability management. We also have a doctrace dashboard. So this is information would be relevant if you have doctrace. So doctrace is a threat intelligence platform, and it basically looks, well, I shouldn't say threat intelligence. It is a network anomaly detection platform. So it looks for a certain activity which could be indicative of network-based anomalies. And if we look at all of these dashboard widgets, they're all interactive. So we can actually click on these, and from this we can drill into the actual data that's being referred to by this widget. So in this case, we could go over here and we could say, I want to look at these logs, and I want to open that into a new window. And so now we're into the LogPoint search interface. So LogPoint's search interface enables an analyst to write complex queries And so basically, this is the actual search query that produced the data. And basically, I think it's beyond the scope of this demo to get into the details of how this is created. But needless to say, this is a very powerful interface. I just want to spend a little time showing you a little bit more about what's possible with the interface. So at this point, I'm going to just look at all logs for the past 6 hours here. And so actually, I'm going to change this. Now we're looking at all the logs from the past 6 hours, and you can see that we've got 322,000 logs. And so basically, the way LogPoint will present logs through the search interface is obviously there's a timeline here that tells you when the logs occurred. Depending on what you're looking for, this can be interesting. But now we're actually looking at the raw logs, and so we can start to see on this panel to the right the actual normalized log, which is this portion. And the normalized log is once again, it's taking the bits out of the logs and storing it in a structured format, which is key value pairs. So in this case, sent data size would be the key, and 522 would be the value. And then of course we also have the raw logs here, and so the raw logs are kept. It's actually configurable whether you or not you keep the raw logs, but generally most organizations that we work with do keep the logs, and they can be useful for compliance reasons as well as for possible litigation if they're ever needed. But so scrolling down here, we can see that there's different log types, so that these logs are different sizes, so we can assume that they're from different sources. And we also notice here that there's some descriptors here, some labels. So basically, LogPoint is able to provide labels to logs, and labels basically characterize the logs as to what they're related to. And so labels are useful in both from a visual standpoint in helping the analyst to understand what a particular log is related to, and labels are also useful for searching. So if you didn't know anything about the LogPoint search interface, and you ran this empty query in order to look at the logs, you could start poking around and find some interesting things. So if we look at this panel left here, we have event category. So we can click on that, and we can see now from these logs that have been pulled up from the search, what are the different categories that represented. So we can see that 24% of the logs are in the category of user account management. So right here, obviously, basically, this interesting fields slices and dices these logs, allows you to kind of drill into different aspects of what they are. So if I click on this traffic one, I can kind of assume that this is probably from firewall logs, and it is in fact. And so looking here at the interesting fields, I noticed that one of the interesting fields, basically one of the fields that 100% of all these logs have a field that says application. So since we have a next-gen firewall, we can actually look in here, and we know that next-gen firewall is actually able to identify applications. So here we can see all the applications that are running through the firewall within the last 6 hours. And one thing that immediately jumps out to me as a security practitioner is Dropbox, because Dropbox obviously has kind of a reputation as being something that is to be avoided with respect to security. So here, without really knowing too much about what we're doing, we've basically filtered the logs to logs from the firewall related to Dropbox. And you'll notice we can look at the labels here. We can see a number of them that are deny and others that are allow. So let's further refine this search into looking at just logs that allow. So basically, right now we're looking at, for the past 6 hours, all Dropbox traffic that has gone through this. And so now, now we could take this data, and of course, there is some learning curve associated with doing this, but we could take the result of this query, use the pipe symbol, and we could start to do things with it. So in this case, LogPoint is giving you context-aware assistance in terms of building a query to actually do something with this. But we know we want to build a chart. We want to build a chart that takes the sum of the data size field, and so and we want to display that by user. Oop. Typo. Oh, another typo. So very quickly, without too much effort, what I've built here now is a look at the users which are using Dropbox and actually transmitting information, and we can sort this by the amount of bytes that were transferred. And now we can actually take this search, and if this was interesting to us and we wanted to see on our dashboard how which were the top users of Dropbox and who's using Dropbox, we could actually send this to our dashboard, and so we can create a dashboard widget out of this. We could also create an alerting rule, so we could be alerted every time that a user actually uses Dropbox. So the search interface is very powerful and rich, and we could spend hours looking at that. I do want to switch gears a little bit. So we've looked at dashboards and we've looked at searches, and so it's kind of both either side of the spectrum. Dashboards being very simple presentation of data, and the search queries being a little bit more complex. So LogPoint also has the concept of search templates, and they actually provide a good compromise between the power of dashboards and the power of searches. So, for example, we can build these analytical widgets, which are very similar to those in dashboards, and we can also build this parameter panel. So the use case here is, let's say that you've got a tier 1 analyst that is maybe not as experienced in terms of threat hunting, but you want to give this person the ability to at least do some basic threat hunting, at least open up cases and qualify them so that then they can be passed along to a higher level analyst. So this interface would allow an analyst to basically leverage the power of the dashboards, but focus the query that's being represented. So in this example, he knows that Bob has called him up and Bob has an issue with his computer, so he can put Bob into the query, and we can see from a number of different widgets. This one, compromised workstation, this is likely information from the antivirus system, and we can see that Bob does have Bob's machine was indicated as being a compromised workstation. And in fact, we have some of the file hashes that were associated with Bob's workstation. So that user could then could then drill into the logs, and without having to do any more detailed analysis than this, the analyst could then create an incident out of this and say Bob's workstation. So at this point, I'm going to switch gears as well. So I want to take a look at the incidents page. So basically, LogPoint generated incidents can be viewed from the incidents tab on the, actually, let me step back here. Let's start talking about alert rules first. So LogPoint ships with over 500 possible alert rules out of the box. And so once again, these alert rules are basically, these enable LogPoint to look for different types of threats which may be on your network or in your environment and alert you to their existence. And so once again, we have over 500 out of the box. Of course, they're not all enabled by default, and we don't recommend that our our customers enable all of them by default, but certainly to enable, the ones that are relevant to their environment, we make it easy by pre-building them. And many of these are related to things that you would expect a SIEM to look for. So things like port scans, account lockouts, brute force attacks. And we also have a number of vendor-specific alerts. So, if you have a particular product, for example, Proofpoint email, then you can look and see what we have in terms of content related to alerts on Proofpoint email. So for each of these alert types, you can specify the notification steps that are taken. So, for example, when this was a SQL injection, I believe, alert, we can specify that the alert notification occurs over email. So we can tell it to occur over email, and we can actually put within the body of the email some content related to the actual event itself. We also support syslog and SNMP notifications. And HTTP notification and SSH notifications are interesting because with these capabilities, you're essentially going beyond notification. You can actually start to build in automated responses. So with the HTTP notification, we can have we can make a REST API call, for example, and have the alert trigger some type of action. Similarly, with SSH notifications, we're able to specify a server and a command. And so basically with this, we can start to automate responses to certain types of events, and configurable. And basically anything that can be accomplished with a script could be automated. So now I'm going to actually switch over back to the incidents tab that I clicked on before. So LogPoint generated incidents would appear within the incidents tab. So this incident interface is really a very basic incident management interface. It is not intended to replace an existing ticketing system or an existing incident management system if you already have one. But if you do not have one, then this certainly could be used and provides basic incident management capabilities. The panel on the left allows you to filter for certain types of interfaces. I'm sorry, certain types of incidents. You can filter based on the criticality, the type, and the status. And then the events themselves allow the user to enter comments. And certainly you can resolve and close them as well. So it's very basic functionality, and but certainly useful in terms of if you do not have an incident management platform to begin with. So moving along, I'm going to switch over to the reporting interface. So once again, LogPoint prides itself in having a very rich and flexible reporting interface. And so LogPoint allows you to create customized reports, and the entire report generation occurs within LogPoint. So it is not necessary that you export data into some other third-party tool like Crystal Reports. Basically, everything can be designed and configured within LogPoint. LogPoint report templates are customizable. Once again, there is a wealth of pre-built report templates corresponding to different vendors' products, as well as different security frameworks and different compliance mandates. So in this case, we're looking at a GDPR report that came standard with LogPoint. We can actually click on it to edit, and we can see what this report is comprised of. So basically, very similar to dashboards in terms of it being comprised of individual content blocks, each block being derived from a LogPoint search, and then each block being each search's data being represented in whatever diagram, chart, format is relevant and appropriate. If you wanted to add an additional content block to this, you could say add select query, and you would be prompted to pick the query that you'd like to add to this. So you could look through your search history, or through saved searches, or through vendor searches, for example. So you could pick the query, and then you can pick the whether you want to use a chart or table. If you pick chart, you can then pick give it a name, and then pick whatever type of chart is relevant. So now we've got an extra content block on that report. These reports can be scheduled. They can be exported in different formats, and then you can create these reports. Once reports have been generated, they will end up in your inbox. So we could look at this report, which was run recently. And this is an HTML report. So obviously this is skinned with LogPoint's watermark and LogPoint's graphics, but certainly you could absolutely change that to be whatever you want it to be. It could be your company's or your customers' logos. And we've got a table of contents. We've got some content blocks and some header information, and then we can get into the actual data. And this report has a lot of tabular data, but certainly other reports could have other types of graphics. So at this point, I want to switch gears and move to the last portion of the demo. So we want to take a look at the LogPoint UEBA dashboard, and so we'll jump to that now. So LogPoint UEBA, this is an optional component. It stands for User and Entity Behavioral Analytics, and really this is that machine learning component that I mentioned during the PowerPoint, which augments what you can accomplish with a rule-based SIEM by using machine learning algorithms and machine learning methods. And so here on LogPoint UEBA, we can see that of 114 million logs that were analyzed, 2,500 anomalies were detected, and from that, 3 risky entities were identified. So the way this works is LogPoint will build models of entities being, could be users, could be websites, could be servers, could be shares, and basically LogPoint will build a behavioral baseline of how that entity typically behaves. And then when the behavior varies statistically from the baseline, LogPoint will log that as an anomaly. And certainly as anomalies kind of accrue, they will increase the likelihood that something suspicious may be going on, and they will bring your attention to that. So in this case, we can see the overall trend over the past, over the past month or so, a couple months of data, and we can see the trend of risk for the organization has climbed, and we're also able to see what has contributed to that risk. If we click on the Explore tab, we're able to dig in a little bit deeper. So right now we're looking at basically 24 hours of risky events or anomalies, and we can see that timeline in this graphic. And certainly the high risk events are pictured in red and are shown at the top of the scale, and the lower risk ones are orange and yellow and gray. And so with this, we can we can kind of focus in on which events we want to look at. This bottom right panel shows us the actual anomalies that occurred throughout the course of this day. And in the bottom left, we see the top risky users. Now, we could also look at the top risky websites or servers, for example, but in this case, let's focus on the users. So we can see that Josh Newman has a score of 98, and he's that's categorized as extreme risk. Basically, the scoring methods work 0 to 100, and so LogPoint will assign a user a score based on the number of and severity of the anomalies that user has been associated with. So if we want to drill a little bit into Joshua Newman and see what he's been doing, we can click on him, and that will refocus this pane to look at just the anomalies that Josh has been a part of. And in fact, if we actually want to focus on just those extremely risky events, we can actually click here, and that will further focus this to just those ones that were deemed extremely risky. So we're starting to look into this. We can see why does LogPoint think that Josh Newman is a risky entity or risky user. So the first thing is Joshua Newman worked in this hour. So what hour is that? So we can actually click on the graphic and we can see that. So Josh Newman worked on this day sometime around, looks like around 7:30, and Josh typically works afternoon hours. So he typically is active between 1 and 10. This very clearly shows that that this behavior, is anomalous at the very least, and maybe by itself isn't worthy of investigation. But when a series of anomalies, then it's more likely that something may be going on. So we can also see that Joshua then proceeded to post a large amount of data onto a site on the internet. And here we can see some of the analytics that go into determining that. So we can see the average amount of data that Josh typically posts, the expected high amount that Josh would post, the observed, so how much he actually posted, and then we can start to see some of the information about what some of the other users, what their expected and maximum values are. So here again, we can see that this is something that would be very difficult to model with using traditional rule-based approaches. For example, what threshold would be appropriate in determining whether or not someone is posting too much data to the internet. Well, certainly that depends on what they typically do, whether it's part of their job, and it also depends on what their peers do. So maybe Joshua works for the marketing group, and maybe the marketing group uses a partner, and they have to load very large graphics files up. So maybe this is not maybe this by itself is not something that is worthy of investigation. However, when stringed together and when coupled with other suspicious events, this bubbles up to the surface and makes it more likely that Joshua could be a risky user and could be worthy of investigation. So at this point, this concludes the planned demonstration. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to check the chat box and see if there are any questions. And it looks like there's a question related to flows. So are flows considered in the advanced search outcome? So let me actually, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by flows. I'm wondering if you're meaning network flows like NetFlow or SFlow. So let me see if I can actually unmute the panelists. I'm not sure who actually answered that question. So let me answer it the best I can. So are flows considered in the advanced search outcome? So yes. So certainly flows meaning traffic flows like net flows are certainly a viable network a data source, and so those net flow type traffic flows could be ingested by LogPoint, and they certainly could be searched. If your question is, well, actually, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, so I will certainly invite whoever asked that to ask a follow-on question. And I apologize, I believe there's a way for me to unmute the panel, but I'm not sure exactly how to do it. So does anybody, looks like there's another coming into the chat. So how is license based on volume of devices? So that's a question I can't answer. So licensing is based on the number of event sources or the number of data sources. So it is not based on volume. It's based on basically how many devices from which you want to send data. So it's a licensing model which is which encourages organizations to send as much information as they can, as makes sense, and certainly not to not to make security decisions based on pricing considerations. Are there any other additional questions at this point? Okay, we've got a couple more. We are currently evaluating LogPoint for our security as a service portfolio, and it is difficult because we cannot find proper configuration guide. Do you have any? So yes. So looks like that's Marescu. Certainly, please feel free to reach out to me after this call. So my email address is jmc@logpoint.com. So it's pretty simple. Please feel free to reach out to me directly. And with respect to to your evaluating LogPoint, I assume that you're looking at the LogPoint Director. So the LogPoint Director is an add-on to LogPoint. It's basically a management console and allows managed services providers to manage multiple LogPoints. So I'm guessing that you have questions about that. I'd be happy to get you some more documentation. Please reach out. Do you have a partner in India to do the demo? That is a good question. I do not know if we do. We very well may have partners in India. If you wanted to reach out to me directly, I can follow up and let you know. We certainly have a portion of our company that for development and support that's based in Nepal. But I assume that we probably have local partners in India as well. Okay, so it looks like that may be it. I'd like to thank everyone again for joining me. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions, and thank you very much.